Will you please put your hands together for Matthew Geraths?
I am too old to still be going to my childhood pediatrician. I know this because I am 18 years old, sitting on a little red fire truck, looking at a poster of a clown honking his own nose and laughing, while I wait for Dr. Peter to come back with the results. Nothing about this room makes me feel good about myself, nor does it offer any kind of comfort. But the truth is I didn't know anywhere else to go. I didn't know anyone else to ask. I was scared, so I asked for help. Well, then I'm on that table, waiting, feeling exposed and vulnerable, trying not to make eye contact with the clown. And I hear a hand on the doorknob, and in walks the doc. And he has this large, official-looking envelope. It has these two little circular tabs and a red string tied around them to keep it sealed. And he stands in front of me, or hovers, and I feel like I have to look up, and I don't know if this is because I'm on a child-sized table or because of how small and scared I feel. And I watch him undo that string, and I can tell he is taking his sweet, sweet time. And as he's doing this, he holds just a sustained, judgmental eye contact, this disappointed look on his face. And right before he opens the envelope, he squints, almost as if to squeeze out a little more of the judgy. And he looks at me and he says, "What are you gonna do when this is positive?" I feel my lips go numb, and this pain that's been in my chest just radiates throughout my body, and my heart breaks, in part because I just heard when, not if. And because I feel all the disgust I should when viewing myself through that man's eyes. And it just piles on to this new feeling of shame I have. And I think to myself, this all started a month ago when I met Rebecca. You see, up to this point, my sexual career could best be described as still figuring his shit out, with a lot of areas of needed growth. What few performance reviews I had, that was the kind of feedback I was getting. Not great. And Rebecca, well, she was several years older and way, way cooler. And honestly, I was a little surprised she was interested. I wasn't sure what she saw, but I was excited to find out the answer. So there I was in her room, which was way more adult than the one I kept at my parents' house. And we're in bed, making out, and it was terrible. It's real bad. I didn't know what I was experiencing. It was more of an oral stabbing than kissing. Rebecca had an exceptionally long tongue, and she was using it to rapidly probe the back of my throat. And I was not into it. Moreover, I couldn't really figure out her rhythm, so we kept sexually stepping on each other's toes, and it lent to this kind of awkward, stilted cadence. And I didn't know how or what to say because she was older. I figured she had more experience in sexual wisdom. Clearly, this was a sexual technique I hadn't learned yet. And obviously, everybody knew it and loved it. So I told myself, it's just like blue cheese. Hated that. But after some repeated exposure, I acquired the taste. So thankfully, we stopped. And And Rebecca wants to know if I have a condom. And at this, I kind of perk up because not only did I have a condom, I had been practicing a lot. Because, area of needed growth. And so I was feeling good. I opened the package on the first try, didn't slip around or anything, and I was confidently putting that condom on. And out of nowhere, I hear, "What the fuck do you think you're doing? You're supposed to pinch the top." I freeze. And in less than a second, I go through all the stages of grief. I start with, "That didn't happen." Then I went to, "How dare you?" And then into, "Let's just agree that didn't happen." And then down into, "Fuck, that definitely happened." And as I eased into that acceptance, I felt humiliated. I didn't just feel humiliated, I also felt my erection wither and die. And for the next hour and a half, I feel like I'm on a conference call with Rebecca, myself, and my penis. And we're all trying to get on the same page. And it is not happening. And in the midst of all this, Rebecca looks at me and asks, "What's wrong with you?" Again, not great. But it's worse. Because she doesn't just ask once. She puts it on repeat throughout the whole experience. And each time she asks, I feel myself sink further and further into myself. I feel numb. I feel disconnected from the experience. I feel like I want to float or run out the door. And it gets bad. It gets so bad that I finally decide to have a serious conversation with my penis. I said, "Look, we're in this together. We're a team. If you could just do me a solid, I promise you, I will never put you in this situation again. I will keep you safe." I get my erection. And I proceed to have the quickest orgasm and deploy the quickest exit strategy, because all I want to be is away from this. And afterward, when I'm alone, I'm trying to pick up these pieces. I'm trying to understand how I could cause so much damage and hurt simply from not knowing and being nervous. In other words, I interpreted that whole experience as my fault. And it was about 2 weeks later, just about the time where I stopped obsessing all day, every day, to, like ruminating every 3 hours, that I get a call from Rebecca. And the first and only thing she says is, "I think you need to go get tested for HIV." And that is why I'm on that stupid red fire truck, waiting for Dr. Peter to tell me what the results are. And he finally opens the letter, and he's looking at the documents, and I'm desperately trying to read anything off his face, and I'm getting nothing. And he finally looks up, and he says, "Well, they're negative, but I hope you think about this next time you want to have sex." Not great. But I feel myself sink further in, and frankly, I kind of feel a breaking. I feel something not there anymore. And I do think about it. Not so much about HIV, but the profound gift of shame that man just gifted me when he chose to use fear and judgment to try to teach me a lesson. And a lesson that's not even all that clear to me to this day. I think maybe he wanted me to feel terrible, which I already did. But afterward, what I learned from those two experiences was that vulnerability and asking for help was dangerous and frankly not worth it. And I internalized that, and I decided that I would never use those strategies again. And I didn't for years. The way I decided to keep the promise I made to my penis was basically to just get on script. What that means is I would just perform whatever was expected given the person or situation. And this led to a lot of situations where I said yes when really I wanted to say no. I would feign pleasure. I'd even fake orgasms to make sure the other person felt good. And every time I did that, I felt like I was betraying myself in an attempt to avoid that shame. And of course, it just made more shame. And so I found myself in this sexual double bind. Basically, if I had it, often not great. And if I avoided it, it was often a lot worse. So I was damned if I do and damned if I don't. Now, what makes this deeply ironic was after Dr. Peter, pretty much my whole education and career was focused on gender and sexualities. I'd become a sex researcher and I taught college students about human sexuality. And yet, I often felt so detached from my experiences. I would feel alienated. And I pretty much resigned myself to that being my reality until I met Quinn. I had never met anyone like Quinn. Their sexuality didn't seem informed by shame the way mine was. Quite the opposite. They always had this kind of playful spontaneity. When we first met, we started flirting right away. Now, I used the flirting style that's coy and indirect, kind of that will they or won't they. Quinn, on the other hand, was, oh, we will, how about tonight? Yeah. It was shocking. And so anytime I would hint or joke about sex, they mostly responded with, yeah, I look forward to that. Tonight. So I went over. And as I was walking into their bedroom, I tripped over what turns out to be an aggressive set of anal beads. And I picked them up. I mean, I literally stubbed my toe. So I picked them up, and I was like, oh. You know, direct communication. And so, without missing a beat, Quinn chuckles and was like, yeah, butt's a playground of pleasure. I was like, I'm sorry. Did you just say the butt is a playground of pleasure? I mean, who says that? And that's future me. But at the time, again, without missing a beat, they're like, yeah, I'm happy to show you. It's like, okay. So we're in bed making out, and it's good. There's no tongue stabbing. And we work our way out of our clothes. And eventually Quinn kind of initiates sex. Now, I'm a little thrown off because I hadn't been in a situation like this. I couldn't really read what their expectation was, so I didn't know what my performance was supposed to be. But I go along with it, despite my hesitation and kind of feeling about it. And afterward, we're laying there, and Quinn rolls over and looks at me with a smile. And I hear them ask, you didn't want to have sex, did you? There's a pause. And I'm waiting for that old sinking feeling to kick in. But it doesn't. Instead, I kind of feel safe. And I think it's because Quinn asked from a genuine place of curiosity, and I didn't feel any judgment. So for the first time in a long time, I gave myself permission to be honest, and I said no. And I saw the hurt on their face. And they even started to cry. But it was different. First, instead of doing what I would almost always do in the past, which would be mentally to retreat into my shame cave and just kind of sit in this awkward silence, I pushed myself to stay right there. And I tried to reciprocate that genuine curiosity. And I asked, what's going on? And the response was, I just hurt for you. I didn't. expect that. And so this happened. And of course, that made me even more curious. So I asked, like, what do you mean by that? Like, what? And they continued to explain that basically when I was honest, I had confirmed their suspicion of what my internal world was like, and that they were heartbroken from a place of empathy, really because they had done the same in the past, and they shared a couple stories, which again in turn made me want to share more. And I started sharing stories I had never shared with anybody before. And by the end of the night, we are this hot, teary mess of goodness. And it was great. In some ways, it was the best sexual experience I'd ever had. I walked away feeling a little more put together, a little more whole. And a lot started to change for me after that. I kind of went from performing sex based on someone's expectations to just owning my sexuality. And I would do this through starting to consistently express what my wants and boundaries were, which kind of helped me slide into that more playful, spontaneous space, which leads to, well, a lot of sexual creativity. And we had a lot of amazing sexual adventures. Right about this time, I also realized I wanted a career change. And it's funny because actually, just last Thursday, I was in another office thinking about that night. There's no clowns. Never can. But there is this little wooden figure about 5 inches tall with a 7-inch boner. And every time I look at it, it makes me laugh. You see, I decided to become a sex therapist. And my mentor gave me that after I had graduated. And when I started practicing sex therapy, I put it in my office to remind me of a couple of things. One, when I look at it, it always reminds me to kind of sit in that curiosity and wonderment. Because, I mean, when you look at that, how does it not fall over, right? Like, it's kind of magical. But when I look at it, I also think about the way in which shame teaches us to hide away our vulnerability. And nothing could be more vulnerable than letting it all hang out like that. And so it's kind of a beautiful thing. And as I'm thinking this, I hear someone put their hand on my doorknob, and in walks a new client. And they sit about 2 feet from me, and we're at eye level, and I can see on their face what I imagine, or what I see is really intense apprehension. And I imagine that's from feeling exposed and feeling vulnerable because they just asked for help. And this is one of my favorite moments. At least for me personally, it always feels like a reclaiming of what that 18-year-old lost on that red fire truck. And over the years, if there's anything I've learned, is that we all need a lot less shame, a little more curiosity, and a whole lot more compassion. Because when we do that, yeah, the butt really is a playground of pleasure. Thank you.